Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another exciting episode of Universal You. Today, I am going to be sharing with you just how the Atlanteans implemented the instructions they were given from higher consciousness to save this planet. In the previous video, I explained just a bit on what the higher consciousness grid is, the unity consciousness grid, the cosmic consciousness grid. I explained what it is and how it holds the consciousness of this planet and how it had to be reactivated after the actions of the Martians resulted in it entering a passive state. Okay, all right. In the previous video, I basically illustrated how we, Earth, was at a very high state, a very higher vibrational state of consciousness, and how the synthetic macabre that the Martians accidentally created resulted in a severe consciousness drop. Now, the Ascended Masters at the time had their macabres activated, which means they weren't affected, but they needed assistance from higher consciousness to bring about that state of higher dimensional reality we were in. And now I'm just going to go into a bit of detail into what they did. All right, are we on the same page? Let me continue. All right. The project to rebuild the unity consciousness grid was undertaken by three beings, and their names were Thoth, Ra, and Aragat. Now, I use these names as their Egyptian cultural derivatives. They also have Greek cultural derivatives and Roman cultural derivatives, which I'll get into a little later. But what is important to understand is these beings are originally Atlantean, and to call them by their Atlantean cultural derivatives would be redundant, because this was a point in consciousness in which there was no language. This was a point in very higher vibrational awareness in which the idea of language hadn't even come to fruition, merely because they communicated telepathically. Thought is the true medium of communication, and love is the true medium of knowledge. This is just a roundabout way for me to explain why I'm using these particular names, all right? Anyway, these three beings, Thoth, Ra, and Aradat, flew by means of their activated macabres to the land of Kem, which is now modern-day Egypt. At the time, it was a rainforest. It wasn't a desert. They went to the point where the axis of the old unity consciousness emitted, the vortex where the old unity consciousness emitted. They were going to rebuild the new grid on the axis or vortex of the old unity consciousness grid, as per instructions they were given from higher consciousness. All right. Now they had to wait until just the right moment to do this. Specifically, they had to wait until the precession of the equinox was in a low ebb of consciousness, and we were entering a period of awakening. I'll have to go into detail on the precession of the equinox at some point. It basically illustrates periods of awakening and going to sleep and awakening as our solar system moves to galactic center. But I don't really prefer this mode of illustration because from a metaphysical point of view, your awakening is dependent on your choice. The effort you put in to raise your own consciousness awareness is entirely yours. Although, yes, there are certain astrological components that may have an effect on that. Anyway, what's important is that they had to do this in about 13,000 years. It had to be complete by the end of the 20th century. We couldn't go any longer than that, or we would have destroyed ourselves. Okay, stakes. Anyway, this is the very interesting part I'm about to share with you. I found this immensely fascinating. They had to complete the grid in higher dimensions. They built the temples, various sacred sites by thought in higher dimensions, and then they manifested them in this world of experience. This is incredible. You have to understand that these beings were high dimensional in nature. I want to say 6-dimensional beings. What they thought happened. Now, to validate this, just the idea that the main sacred sites of this planet were constructed by thought in higher dimensions. Archaeologists have discovered that the oldest stones of most of these temples are at the top. Think about that. If I give you a pyramid and say that the oldest stone, the capstone, is the oldest, just grasp that for a moment. It completely shifts the notion we have on how the pyramids and sacred sites were constructed. Brilliant. Anyway, all right. So what they did is they mapped the pyramids to the golden mean spiral or vortex that was emanating from the earth into space. Now, I explained the higher consciousness grid as being sort of meridians around the body of Earth. Now, from these meridians, from these nodal points, emanates vortexes, and I'll put an image up of one of these vortexes that has been captured through very sophisticated photography. I know for a fact that one of these vortexes, or spirals, if you will, emanate from Arizona, which is why it's a hub of awareness and consciousness awakening. Anyway, Thoth built the pyramids, not Chepos or whatever his name is. Thoth, by a thought. Anyway, so fourth dimensionally, they constructed a network of buildings and structures over the whole planet, and they placed them on the nodes of the energy matrix using the central vortex in Kem, modern day Egypt. All right. This is known as the solar cross today. I put an image up. Anyway, how brilliant is that? They by thought constructed the sacred sites and placed them on the nodal points. And they did this in an effort to recreate the unity consciousness grid, to bring every being on this planet into higher dimensional awareness. I find this scintillating, to say the least. Anyway, right. The locations of the sacred sites of the world are intentional. They're not built by accident. They're there for a reason. And if you know anything about way lines or longitude and latitude in general, you'll see that if you map the sacred sites, you get a very distinct grid. Anyway, this is just a bit of a way for me to say that all of the sacred sites on this planet are created by a single awareness, a single consciousness working in harmony, created all of the sacred sites in an effort to heal this planet. Now, this is a bit interesting. The Egyptian Vortex, the one I've been talking about, represents the north pole of the unity consciousness grid, and the south pole emanates from the heart-shaped island of Moria. If you go through the earth at Moria, you'll come out in Egypt, and I'll put a picture up to illustrate what this image, what this relationship creates, and that's a toroidal field. A toroidal field. Now, I was going to go into all of this stuff in the cosmic consciousness series, but I feel it is important to share this, just in relation to you personally. The toroidal field appears everywhere in nature, and it is a form that is created by a singularity. A chakra is a psychic energy center, and the toroidal field illustrates the form of a chakra. All right? How brilliant is that? The singularity at the heart of this planet is a psychic energy center that forms a toroidal field. This planet is a mind. It's alive, and it has a heart. It's brilliant. Keep this in mind. I'm going to be sharing light codes, Star Child light codes, or a very unique form of bhakti yoga that I devised in my dissertation. At some point, I will be sharing this with you, and this information is very imperative to that. Anyway, the toroidal field illustrates very poignantly the significance of mindfulness and having positive thoughts. If you understand that your thoughts have mass and frequency, that positive thoughts correspond with positive circumstances in life. This is such valuable information for those of you who want to change your lives merely by altering your perspective on reality. Anyway, if my pace was a bit brisk, I must apologize. I genuinely find this topic of discussion to be groundbreaking. And yeah, all right, that basically illustrates what the Ascended Masters did to re-establish the higher consciousness grid on this planet. And I'm going to go into a bit more detail on it in the next video, because the nodal points of these sacred sites represent the fulcrums of various cultures around this world and the origins of various archetypal deities in various cultures, and it illustrates how ultimately, from a universal and absolute perspective, they're all very similar, extremely similar, and the notion of unity becomes very evident in light of this information. All right, as always, it is a unprecedented privilege to share this information with you. As always, love yourselves,